Toan's mother pretended to be sick. Will that make Toan leave Tu Diem? The house was filled with urgency, servants rushing, the sound of hurried footsteps echoing against the marble floor. News spread quickly. Toan's mother had suddenly fallen ill. Her frail voice called for her son, trembling with pain, but behind those weary eyes hid a storm of calculation. Tu Diem stood frozen, her heart torn in two. Was this real, or just another test, a cruel game meant to pull Toan away from her? She saw the anguish in Toan's face, the man torn between the duty of a son and the love of a man. In that moment, every choice felt like betrayal. If he stayed, his mother's shadow would crush their love. If he left, Tu Diem's heart would break into silence. Was this sickness a cry for love, or a weapon to destroy it? Will Toan's heart waver, or will his love for Tu Diem endure? The golden afternoon light spilled through the tall windows of the family home, but inside the air was heavy with unease. Ly Tu Diem sensed something was wrong. The servants whispered in the hallway, their eyes filled with worry. When she asked, no one dared to answer directly. Only one word was repeated again and again: mother. When CEO Toan arrived home from the company, his heart clenched at the sight before him. Madame Tu, his strong and proud mother, lay on the bed with a pale expression. Her hand pressed against her chest, as if every breath was a struggle. The room smelled faintly of medicine, and the doctor's bag sat on the table. Mother? Toan rushed to her side, his voice thick with fear. Why didn't anyone call me sooner? Madame Tu looked at him with weak eyes, her voice trembling. I didn't want to worry you, Toan. But seeing you so distracted lately, spending more time with that girl than with your own family, perhaps it was too much for my heart. The words struck like a blade. Tu Diem, who had followed quietly into the room, froze. Shame and guilt tightened her chest. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her lips trembled. The implication was clear. She was the cause of this sudden illness. For days, Toan remained torn between duty and love. His mother's health seemed fragile, her sighs heavy, her eyes clouded with sadness whenever Tu Diem entered the room. The house grew colder, the silence thicker. Tu Diem tried to help, offering tea and gentle care, but Madame Tu turned her face away, as if even her presence was poison. One night, Toan sat alone in his study, his head in his hands. He loved Tu Diem with every part of his soul, but his mother's suffering haunted him. Could he truly build happiness on top of his mother's pain? The thought cut deep. But Tu Diem, though broken-hearted, made her choice. She walked into the study, her eyes red, but filled with quiet strength. Toan, she whispered, I cannot be the reason your mother suffers. If my leaving restores her health and peace, then I will go. I only want what is best for you. Her words shattered Toan's heart. He rose, gripping her shoulders, his eyes fierce. No, Diem, do you not see? This is not your fault. My mother's illness, it feels like a test. But love that abandons you at the first obstacle is not love at all. I will not lose you. In the doorway, unseen by them, Madame Tu stood silently. She had not expected her plan to cut so deeply, nor had she expected to witness Tu Diem's selflessness. For the first time, doubt crept into her resolve. Perhaps the girl's love was not weakness but strength. The night was heavy with unspoken truths, and the battle between a mother's fear and a son's devotion had only just begun. The days that followed were filled with silence and shadows. Tu Diem moved through the house quietly, as if she were already fading from Toan's life. She avoided his gaze, spending her time helping the grandmother or reading in the garden, her heart torn between love and sacrifice. Toan, however, refused to let her slip away. Each evening, he sat by her side, holding her hand, whispering words of reassurance. Diem, he would say, his voice low but steady, you are not alone. Whatever games are being played around us, my heart belongs only to you. Yet the tension with Madame Tu grew heavier. Every time Toan showed affection toward Tu Diem, his mother sighed deeply, pressing her hand to her chest as if the weight was unbearable. The guilt gnawed at Tu Diem, until one night, she quietly packed a small bag. Her decision was made. She would leave before Toan was forced to choose between her and his mother. But fate intervened. As she stepped into the dark hallway, she heard voices from Madame Tu's room. The door was ajar, and through the crack, Tu Diem froze at the truth. Madame Tu was speaking to the maid in a strong, steady voice, nothing like the weak tone she used before her son. "There is nothing wrong with my heart," she confessed coldly. "But if my son continues with that girl, our family's reputation will crumble. I will not allow it. Better he thinks my health depends on her absence than to see him destroy everything his father built." Tu Diem's hand trembled around the small bag. Tears blurred her vision, not only from pain but from the realization of the cruel deception. For the first time, she felt not just rejected, but betrayed. The next morning, Toan found her sitting silently by the window, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked at him, then at his mother, who entered the room with a frail act once again. And before Toan could speak, Tu Diem stood tall, her voice breaking but determined. "Madam," she said softly, "I know the truth. You are not sick. You only wish to separate us. But please understand, my love for Toan is not a danger to your family. It is my only truth. If you still believe I am unworthy, then let me go. But do not hurt your son with lies." The room fell silent. Toan turned sharply toward his mother, shock flashing across his face. "Mother, is this true?" For the first time, Madame Tu could not meet his eyes. Her silence spoke louder than words. Toan's heart pounded with fury and sorrow, but he reached for Tu Diem's hand, holding it tightly. "Then, listen to me, mother. If love is a crime, then I will bear it, but I will not abandon her, not now, not ever." Madame Tu closed her eyes, her body trembling not from illness, but from the weight of a mother's fear clashing with a son's unwavering devotion. In that moment, she realized her pretense had only revealed the strength of the bond she had tried to break. The silence that followed Toan's words was suffocating. Madame Tu sat rigid in her chair, her face pale, her hands clenched tightly together. For years, she had controlled her family with authority and fear, but now, faced with her son's defiance, she felt her power slipping away. Tu Diem, standing beside Toan, lowered her gaze. She had spoken her truth, but the cost was heavy. She could feel the judgment in the air, the invisible wall that still stood between her and true acceptance. Finally, Madame Tu's voice broke the silence, sharp but trembling. "You think love alone will protect you, Toan? What about the business? What about the family's honor? Do you think the world will forgive her past? Do you think your father's legacy can survive the whispers?" Toan's jaw tightened, his hand still gripping Tu Diem's firmly. "Mother, I am not afraid of whispers. I am afraid of living without the woman I love. If protecting my family means abandoning my heart, then I am no son you can be proud of." The words struck deep. Madame Tu looked at her son, the boy she had raised into a powerful man. For the first time, she saw not just defiance, but a strength that mirrored his father's, unyielding, proud, and unwilling to compromise on what mattered most. That night, the house felt divided, each heart carrying its own storm. Tu Diem wept quietly in her room, believing her presence would forever be a source of conflict. Toan paced the halls, torn between anger and sorrow, vowing silently never to let her go. And Madame Tu sat alone in her chamber, staring at a faded photograph of her late husband, asking herself if she had become the very thing she once feared, an obstacle to her own child's happiness. Days passed, and the tension lingered like a shadow. But fate brought an unexpected turn. One afternoon, Toan was called away urgently to the construction site of his company. An accident had occurred, and chaos reigned. Madame Tu, left at home, suddenly felt a sharp weakness in her chest, not an act this time, but a frightening reality. As the staff scrambled in panic, it was Tu Diem who ran to her side, holding her, whispering words of comfort, refusing to let go until the doctor arrived. When Madame Tu opened her eyes again, the first face she saw was not her son's but Tu Diem's. Tears stained the young woman's cheeks, her hands still clutching the older woman's tightly. In that fragile moment, The truth became undeniable. This girl, whom she had doubted, whom she had tried to drive away, loved her son with a purity that could not be faked. And even when mistreated, she stayed to protect the family. For the first time, Madame Tu's voice softened, her pride giving way to vulnerability. Diem, why? After everything I did, why didn't you leave me to suffer? Tu Diem's answer was simple, her voice steady, despite the tears. Because you are his mother. And because I love him, I must also love you. The words shattered the last walls around Madame Tu's heart. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, a tear rolled down her cheek, not of anger, but of surrender. Toan walked out of the hospital room, his footsteps echoing through the empty corridor. The heavy silence pressed against him, but his heart was full of determination. He would not allow his mother's schemes, no matter how cleverly disguised, to break what he and Tu Diem had built. Later that night, when he returned home, Tu Diem was quietly arranging the living room, her hands trembling slightly as she placed a vase of flowers on the table. She sensed something was wrong. Turning toward him, her eyes filled with worry, she whispered, "Is your mother very ill?" Toan sighed deeply, then took her hands in his. "Diem, she is not sick. She only pretended to be weak. To make me let you go." Tu Diem's face froze. A storm of emotions swept through her: pain, confusion, and a quiet fear that perhaps she was the cause of a wedge between mother and son. She lowered her gaze, her voice soft as a feather. "If my presence hurts your family, maybe I should leave." But Toan shook his head firmly. His grip tightened, his voice steady, carrying the weight of a promise. "No, Diem, I will not let go of you. Mother will realize in time that you are not a burden, but a blessing. You saved my life, and more than that, you gave me reasons to keep fighting." For a long moment, the two simply stood there, their hearts bound in silent strength. Outside the window, the city lights flickered like distant stars, as if the universe itself bore witness to their vow. Yet Toan knew this was not the end of the battle. His mother was determined, and the road ahead would be filled with trials. But as long as Tu Diem remained by his side, he felt certain no scheme, no lie, no pretense could ever separate them. In life, love often stands as the greatest test of loyalty and courage. The story of Toan and Tu Diem teaches us that true commitment is not measured by the easy moments but by the strength to hold on during trials. When Toan's mother pretended to be sick in order to drive them apart, the situation revealed more than just family conflict. It revealed the values of truth, resilience, and choice. Toan had to decide between filial duty and the woman he loved. It was not an easy decision, for family bonds run deep, and a son's love for his mother is sacred. Yet Toan understood that sacrificing Tu Diem would not heal his family but only deepen the wounds of dishonesty and manipulation. His unwavering stance showed that respect for one's family should never mean surrendering one's own happiness or betraying the person who has stood by you in moments of weakness. Tu Diem, too, showed quiet strength. Even when she feared being the cause of discord, she was willing to step aside out of love. Her humility and sincerity revealed that love is not selfish but selfless, ready to endure pain for the sake of the other. The lesson is clear: genuine love must be protected, even against the storms of misunderstanding and pressure. Families may resist, circumstances may challenge, but love rooted in trust and honesty can withstand them all. Sometimes, it is only through hardship that people come to recognize the true worth of another. Thus, we learn that in the face of manipulation or falsehood, one must stand firm in truth. Love is not about choosing between family and a partner, but about proving through actions that both can coexist if only people open their hearts to understanding.